The man who hurled the coke at her would later swear he hadn't known he was throwing it at his boss's boss. But in the moment, with brown fizz sliding down Natalie's plain blouse and pooling at the edge of the marble, he laughed as if he'd just punched gravity. It was 9 a.m. and the lobby at Murata Global pulsed like a glossy vein, screens pouring graphs and slogans into air-conditioned confidence, turnstiles chirping, the espresso bar orchestrating its hiss and tamp in steam for a line of people who love being first. The receptionist's smile was lacquered to a perfect curve. Above it all, a chandelier mimicked constellations for a building that had unfriended the night. Natalie stood just inside the revolving door, still holding the plastic visitor badge that read N. Carter, Temp. The coke hit her at sternum level, a blunt coldness that bloomed out and down, catching on cotton, catching everyone's attention. The cup bounced once, flipped, and rolled in a circle like a coin that couldn't decide whether to fall. "Oops," said the man with the perfect haircut. He was 23 on paper and 10 in the eyes. Jared, according to his access card, strategic operations intern, the kind who says strategic more often than he asks why. He tilted the empty cup as if the coke had misbehaved. Around him, a few junior analysts snorted the laugh of people who need permission. Behind the reception desk, Vanessa, marketing lead, lashes like little threats, covered her mouth with her fingers and let delight leak through. "Sir," the receptionist said, rebuke trying to find its shoes. "Please." "It's fine," Jared announced for the room. "She's here to clean anyway." He looked at the visitor badge, then at the thrift store blazer, then at the shoes that were practical in the way expensive shoes pretending to be practical are not. "Right?" He didn't wait for an answer because the question wasn't one. He held out the empty cup to her like a teacher offering a lesson. Natalie looked at the cup for exactly one heartbeat too long, long enough for people to decide what kind of person she was. She could have said something. She had a whole lexicon for men who mistook power for permission. Instead, she put the cup on the receptionist's counter, took the stack of napkins someone was finally brave enough to slide toward her, and patted the front of her blouse with the professionalism of someone wiping a table you plan to eat off later. "Kidding, guys," Jared added, an afterthought addendum to his own public script. "No hard feelings, yeah?" His smile was a well-lit hallway to a room containing nothing. The napkins turned into the exact shade of apology corporate environments require. Coke traced a sticky geography down her sleeve and into the cuff. The badge clacked against the marble when its clip slipped. N. Carter rotated face down. "You're making a mess," Vanessa called, sing-song, as if Natalie were the one who had invented gravity wrong. She swiveled on the receptionist's high stool to face the show. "Maintenance is down that hall, sweetie. Take a right at respect." A security guard, new, still practicing his posture, hovered as if training instructed him to absorb liquids with authority. No one moved to hand Natalie a towel. People moved to watch. She dabbed once more and then straightened, pressing her palm flat against the damp place as if pledging allegiance to patience. The coke had found its way beneath her collarbone. Coolness gave way to stickiness, discomfort to data. She breathed in the way you breathe before you change the temperature of a room. "Sorry," Jared said again, performatively. He flicked his wrist, a throwaway gesture. The interns behind him were already telling themselves a story they'd retell over drinks. The new girl, the spill, the laugh, the shrug, the harmlessness of it all. The lobby doors opened again. The sound changed. It wasn't volume, it was pitch. Heads turned not because they wanted to, but because bodies that know hierarchy do what they're told. The CEO walked in, phone still in hand, conversation unfinished. Young for the job and old for the room, he wore the kind of suit that made expensive look like disciplined, not loud. He lifted his chin in that particular way public men do when they use their face as a universal key to buildings, rooms, attention. Behind him trailed two executive assistants as comets and a compliance director already scowling at the day. "Morning," he said to the lobby generally, a practiced warmth that was not false, just efficient. His eyes registered the coke on the floor, the coke on Natalie, the coke on the story they had just written in his absence. Something about his mouth changed by half a molecule. He kept walking until he reached the reception desk, set his phone down without looking at it, and said to Vanessa, Could you get facilities to bring towels? He said please in a way that did not dress him down, but did dress her up, just enough to remind everyone how professionalism works. Of course, Vanessa chirped, performing compliance. She waved at the guard and mouthed towels. The CEO looked at Natalie, not through her. His gaze neither lingered nor slid away. It took inventory. Damp blouse, cheap blazer, hands that knew how to be steady in a room that loved to wobble other people. He tipped his head in greeting the way you nod at someone you've been expecting. Ms. Carter, he said, as if he had known her name before the badge flipped. It sounded like an acknowledgement, not an introduction. A few nearby faces performed the mental math that turns a surname into a rumor. Carter? Which Carter? The last name floated through the air like a login token that worked in certain rooms. Jared blinked. He had been granted his face by privilege and now discovered it was spare change. You know, her, he said to the CEO, confusion squeezing the words. The CEO did not dignify the question because the question misunderstood both people. He turned to the receptionist. Ava, would you please have someone from hospitality bring up a fresh shirt and blazer from the sample rack? Women's small, and coffee for Ms. Carter. His eyes flicked to Natalie, not as a question, but because preference is a currency he liked to carry. How do you take it? Black, she said, and then, because theater is kindness when it isn't weaponized. Thank you. Black, he repeated to Ava, who nodded as if she were writing a song down. And have Margaret meet me in the glass room in 10. At the name Margaret, someone near the elevator straightened. The senior advisor, gray hair pulled into competence, eyes that have seen both the emperor and his tailor, stepped into view from the west corridor, a file tucked under her arm. She took one look at the Coke, and then at Natalie, and then at the CEO, and shifted her weight from one foot to the other, betraying to those who knew what to watch for that the script she had been handed about today had just received edits. Morning, Margaret said, positioning herself at the CEO's 3 o'clock, the way moons find their orbits. The chair inbox flagged the compliance review. She said chair like a direction, not a person. Bring it to glass, the CEO said. 10. She eyed Natalie once more, and so small only people trained in reading rooms would notice, dipped her chin in a nod that said, I thought so, and I'll wait, and you're fine. Jared made a noise that wanted to be a laugh, but came out as a cough. He still held the empty Coke cup in the hand that hadn't learned its new place in the world. So, sorry again? He offered to the air, and then to Natalie specifically. Didn't see you there. I know, Natalie said, and the sentence had more meanings than the lobby was equipped to handle. 2 facilities techs arrived on the double, towels folded like treaties. One dropped to his knees to wick sugar out of marble seams. The other began a perimeter dry down with the care of someone who has learned that floors remember and tell. Ava produced a small garment bag that had materialized as if from a well-behaved cloud. Inside were a crisp white blouse and a navy blazer with a cut that spoke HR's language in legal's dialect. Restrooms down the corridor, second door, Ava said to Natalie, softer now. I'll hold your badge. Natalie handed her the plastic rectangle, the temp letters bold and temporary as designed. For 1 second, she let the name tag sit alone on the counter, as if to remind the building that identity and plastic have never been married, only dating. She walked toward the corridor, wet fabric clinging, Coke whispering stickily down her back. The lift bank flashed a series of floors. Somewhere in the tower, a meeting was starting without one of its essential people. That was fine. Meetings should learn to be patient. She passed a glass-walled conference room where a man in a charcoal suit was telling a chart what to do. She passed a framed photo of the founder, cutting ribbon with a mayor whose smile hadn't learned restraint yet. She passed a plaque bearing the company's creed. Build what matters at the speed of trust. Someone had hung the plaque a half-inch off level. She didn't fix it. Not today. In the restroom, she locked the door and leaned her palms on the cool counter for one quiet breath. The kind that calibrates. The mirror offered back a woman getting older, only in the right places. Patience lines, not fear. A steadiness in the gaze that belonged to someone who has learned how to own silence without renting rage. Coke dripped from her hairline. She smiled at herself, a private little half thing, and began to change. By the time she stepped out, the lobby had recalibrated itself to the correct temperature of contrition. The stain on the marble was gone. The empty cup had disappeared. Jared had too, though his absence trailed behind him like bad cologne. Vanessa's lashes did not flutter. They stood at attention. The CEO reappeared at the corridor mouth, Margaret at his shoulder. He gestured toward the elevator bank. "Glass in 3, he said to her. To Natalie, he said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply touched his phone, and it lit up with a calendar reminder that had been on it for weeks. 9:15, Natalie Carter, Chair Review, Culture Audit. Ava slid Natalie's badge back across the counter with both hands, a ceremony she hadn't realized she needed. The temp letters still shouted their lie. Ava hesitated, then produced a different badge from beneath the counter. Crisp, white, the font suddenly modest. It read, Natalie Carter, Consultant. "Found this," Ava murmured, as if resorting to fiction could keep truth from bursting into flame. "Maybe this one?" "Maybe," Natalie said, attaching it to the new blazer. "Thank you." As Natalie moved toward the elevators, a junior designer, 25 at most, backpack still one size too big for adulthood, stepped into her path. His ears were red, which made the courage he gathered visible. "Hey," he whispered, low so his bravery wouldn't be misheard as challenge. "That was messed up. I'm sorry." "Thank you for saying that," Natalie said. He exhaled like a man who had been allowed to be won. The elevator doors parted. Inside, the walls were mirrored, courteous enough to reflect without multiplying. Margaret held the door with a finger, the old-fashioned human way. As Natalie stepped in, Margaret offered the file she'd been carrying. On the tab, for chairwoman review. "Wrong room," the CEO said to Margaret, almost under his breath, almost smiling. "Right person," Margaret said back, meaning more than one thing. The doors slid closed. The elevator hummed up. The floor numbers blinked like a countdown to a version of the building where appearances would have to ask permission from meaning. In the lobby below, the sticky point where Coke had hit the marble remained clean and dry and absolutely ordinary. Which is to say, no evidence that anything had happened, except for the memory of every person who'd watched and every person who'd chosen not to. Natalie looked at her reflection in the elevator wall and, for the first time that morning, allowed herself a thought she had been carrying all the way from the revolving door. This place measures the wrong things. She pressed her tongue to the back of her teeth, an old habit to keep truths from spilling too early, and smiled, the smaller, quieter kind. The kind that means watch. The glass room was 90% window and 10% furniture. The kind of conference space designed to make people feel visible and therefore honest. It hovered over the city like a fish tank. When Natalie stepped in behind the CEO and Margaret, the skyline arranged itself into a backdrop. Cranes pretending to be progress, clouds pretending not to eavesdrop. 15 minutes, the CEO said to no one and everyone, setting his phone face down. Then I'm in ops. Margaret slid a thin folder onto the table as if it might bruise. Compliance flagged culture, variance between stated values and observed behavior, she said. We have 3 exits in sales this month, citing demeaning environment. 4, Natalie said, because she counted well even when the numbers weren't hers yet. She took the chair at the side of the table, the one people take when they're not auditioning for the head. From there you see more. The CEO's mouth moved in that almost smile again. "Welcome to Murata Global," he said dryly. "Our creed is accurate. Our pace is not." He didn't ask for Natalie's opinion. He'd already paid for it. Margaret opened the folder to the first page. In the up left corner, in neat black, for chairwoman review. It was enough of a whisper to make an anthem later. "Orientation at 10 with HR," Margaret went on. "They'll issue the usual onboarding. Badges, laptop, irrelevant e-learning. We'll term you as consultant for floor comfort." Floor comfort. The phrase made Natalie smile in a way that didn't show. "I'll start on 6, she said. "I want to see how they talk when they don't think they're being overheard." "You're never overheard," Margaret said. "You're observed. It's quieter and more dangerous." The CEO looked at his watch. 15, he reminded the room, which meant go do your work now. He gathered his phone and the small, battered notebook in which he kept the only handwriting he trusted. At the door, he paused. "Miss Carter," he said, "the building will offer you 100 ways to be angry. Take none. Take notes." She nodded. It was a language she'd spoken all her life. HR lived in a soothing, carpeted warren whose walls displayed words like belonging and equity in fonts that wanted to be fonts of grace. Behind a curved desk sat a woman named Rhea, who could thread empathy through policy without snagging it. "Welcome," Rhea said, sliding across a tablet that contained forms that pretended to care. She looked up, really looked, as if the Coke stain had left an outline only certain eyes could still see. "Do you need a minute before we start?" "I'm good," Natalie said. "You wouldn't be," Rhea said, almost a secret. She lowered her voice. "We've had incidents. I'm not permitted to say more." "I saw enough," Natalie replied. Rhea tapped through NDA tabs and benefits brochures like a pianist playing a piece she'd decided to survive. "We'll list you as consultant for departmental access," she said. "Officially placed with experience design for 2 weeks. Unofficially," she shrugged. "It's a big building." In the ergonomics closet, a room full of chairs council could love, a facilities tech swapped Natalie's visitor laptop for a slim company machine with a background photo of a mountain taken by someone who wanted to climb something without leaving their desk. The username field blinked, N. Carter. The system added a suffix to make her unique. C. A junior HR rep breezed in with a lanyard, measured to flatter necks that had never met manual labor. "Here's your permanent badge," she chirped. Then bright, "Oh, funny coincidence. You've got the same last name as—" Rhea kicked a look that could pass legal review. "As 100,000 people," she finished smoothly. "Murata's global." "Right," the junior said, cheeks pinking. "Right." They led Natalie through the maze to the open floor of 6. Cubicles gave way to benches, benches to soft chairs that made people small while calling it collaboration. Half walls created the illusion of privacy, the way frosting creates the illusion of cake. Experience design shared a corner with branding and a sliver of strategy. It smelled like whiteboard solvent and optimism. A string of pendant lights pretended to be a thought. On the far wall, someone had written, "Move fast, fix things," in a hand that wanted to be confident. Vanessa sat at a cluster near the glass, queen of a small country whose GDP was likes. She wore a blazer the color of new money and a smirk she believed was subtle. When she saw Natalie arrive with a laptop hugged to her chest like a freshman, her eyes lit the way a cat's do when something small moves. "Welcome to XD," Vanessa sang. "We do the shiny bits that make the hard bits feel less hard." She didn't offer her hand. She offered a glance at the empty chair near her team, then pointed to a less convenient one near the printer. "You can set up there, hun. Close enough to fetch, far enough not to annoy." "Perfect," Natalie said, seating herself where the paper tray sighed. The metal rack vibrated every time someone printed a deck no one would read. She liked its honesty. "Grab coffees?" someone from strategy asked, sliding a company card across the table without meeting her eyes. 3 oat, 1 almond, 1 regular milk, but only if it's the grass-fed one, and make sure the lids are labeled. Vanessa's is V. She'll die without the oat. Natalie took the card because sometimes you accept a role to see who thanks you. "Sure," she said. "Oh, and—" Vanessa pointed at the whiteboard behind Natalie. "Could you erase those notes? They're not ours. Somebody from sales used our room last night, left a whole tragic brainstorm about loyalty tiers like it's still 2012. Natalie glanced at the board. Someone had scrawled a model that would fail in practice, not on paper. Around it were arrows that understood neither arrows nor causality. She picked up the eraser. A fragment caught her eye just before it vanished. "Comp plan hides culture." She left that one up. Vanessa leaned back. "Cute," she said. "Keep it. It looks like a value." The coffee run took 7 minutes and 2 elevator rides because the lobby bar queued by job title. On her way back, Natalie passed the glass room. Through it, she saw the CEO speaking to the compliance director and Margaret, fingers on the table, a line between his brows deeper than the building liked to allow. Margaret caught sight of Natalie in the reflection and gave the smallest tilt of her head toward an envelope on the credenza. Blink and you'd miss it. On 6, she placed the cups carefully at their proper altars. The thanks ranged from sincere to transactional. Vanessa sipped and announced to the room, "She didn't mess up my milk. We keep her." Jared materialized like a bad sequel, flanked by two interns who had mastered the art of doing nothing in a way that looked like helping. He wore contrition like an accessory. "Hey," he said, performing contrition with his shoulders. "About earlier." "Which part?" Natalie asked. He faltered a fraction. "The coke. I was—" He looked for the word that would make him harmless and found none that didn't cost. "I was a jerk." "Yes," she said. He waited for absolution. When it didn't arrive on a tray, he shifted. "So are we cool?" "We're room temperature," she said, and handed him his grass-fed milk. Yara appeared as if she'd been grown in the server room and released just now. She held a manila envelope against her chest like it might argue. "Facilities sent this up," she said, eyes on Natalie, "for, experience design." "For me," Margaret's voice said, and Yara spun as the senior advisor glided in on quiet shoes. She wore navy like a verdict. "Thank you." She took the envelope, then paused by Natalie's printer-side desk. For a moment, they were side by side like coworkers in a cheap sitcom. Margaret set the envelope down, opened it, and slid one folder an inch toward Natalie. Its tab in crisp type, Chairwoman Review, Culture, Field Notes. Under it, a post-it in careful handwriting. "You asked for the raw. Here it is." "I'll be with legal," Margaret said to no one in particular, and left with the rest of the envelope in her hand. Vanessa watched the exchange with the interest of a cat watching an unfamiliar bag. "What's that?" she asked as soon as Margaret's heels were gone enough to be safe. She reached, playful, invasive, and Natalie placed a finger lightly on the folder. "Printer trouble," Natalie said. "It's loud back here." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Cute." Slack pinged. Channels exploded in the friendly tyranny of a wall. Someone had posted the "Move Fast, Fix Things" mural and an ironically serious debate about whether speed was culturally coded. HR posted a webinar on inclusion. Sales posted a photo of the team celebrating somebody's win that looked like a reenactment of a past life no one admitted to loving. Jared posted a meme about owning your spill and received 3 nervous laughs in a DM from legal. At 11:17, the fire alarm hiccuped, the monthly test. The floor constellated toward exits with the practiced ballet of people who know their evacuation routes better than their job descriptions. Natalie slipped the folder into her laptop sleeve and flowed with them into the stairwell. Stairwells are where buildings tell the truth. Perfume gave way to concrete. Laughter remixed to breath. Vanessa's heels clicked a little faster than her confidence. Jared cracked a joke and threw it down the well. It didn't echo. A designer with a kind mouth and an inconvenient conscience. Noah, according to his badge, ended up beside Natalie on the landing between 5 and 4. He glanced at the sleeve in her arm and then at her face. "You don't look like a temp," he said softly. "Not flirtation, not networking, observation." "Neither do you," she said. He smiled, cheeks admitting how young he still was. "If you need anything, like a seat that isn't by a machine that eats trees for breakfast, there's room by me." He pushed his glasses up. "We don't bite. Much." "Thank you," she said. It was a sentence that carried more jobs than you'd think. On the sidewalk, they assembled under the gray compliance of the sky. The CEO stood with operations, tie tucked, gaze outward. He noticed things people hadn't taught him to notice. Who helped who used the drill to practice power. He noticed Vanessa laughing too loudly and Jared volunteering for nothing, and Natalie standing quietly, 4 feet outside the cluster, as if measuring circumference. Back upstairs, Vanessa had rewritten the day as a performance. A stand-up sprang into existence without anyone agreeing to it. She pointed at a road map and a calendar and spoke the dialect of buzzwords with native fluency. "We're replatforming the loyalty flows to center experience," she announced. "Strategic wants 3 low-lift wins by Friday." Natalie took notes that were not the kind you put in software. When Vanessa finished, she turned to Natalie with a grin. "New girl runs the bread run at noon," she said. "We like those olive sticks from the place that thinks it's Milan." Noah's head surfaced over his monitor. "I can go," he offered. "I'm closer to the elevator." "Let her learn the building," Vanessa said, still smiling. "It's good for her culture." Good for hours, Natalie said and stood, because sometimes you do the chore in order to see who's choreographing. On her way to the elevator, she passed the glass room again. Margaret stood alone inside with the blinds half closed, reading a printout. She looked up just in time to catch Natalie's eye and tapped her wrist. Time. Then she wrote in the air with one finger, L12, lower level 12, archive. Natalie pressed the elevator button. The doors opened to an empty car and a small choice. She missed the noon bread run and made a different one. L12 smelled like cardboard and fluorescent hum. Shelves marched in obedient rows, labels blinking out histories and barcodes. At the far end, a cage labeled HR Archive, authorized, sat open. Inside a banker's box wore a post-it with her name in Margaret's tidy print. She sat on the cold floor and opened it. Inside, exit interviews, anonymous only until you learn to recognize a sentence's gate. Phrases underlined in Margaret's pen. He laughed at me when I spoke up. Looked through me. It starts in the lobby. A copy of a security incident report with more black ink than text. A still image captured at 9:02 a.m. A cup midair, a woman just inside the revolving door, the marble already preparing to be blamed. At the bottom of the box, a thin notebook. On its first page, in the same hand as the post-it, this is the building's voice. It will not sing for you. Make it. Natalie closed the box, climbed back into the elevator, and pressed 6. When the doors parted, Vanessa's laugh was already waiting. Get lost, Vanessa asked, not looking up. Found something, Natalie said, and set the olive sticks on the table in the exact middle of the team's gravity, a small redistribution of mass. She returned to her printer seat and opened her laptop. The mountain wallpaper glittered. She replaced it with a gray field and typed the first line of a document she hadn't told anyone she was writing. Culture audit, field notes, 6th floor, experience design. The building measures the wrong things. She stared at the sentence until it learned how to stand. Then she added another. Humiliation travels faster than apologies. Slack pinged. A DM from an unlisted account arrived. 3 words that asked and promised at once. Glass room. Now? She glanced across the floor. Margaret stood at the far end, framed by glass like a punctuation mark. Between them, Jared told a story with his hands, and Vanessa nodded in a rhythm that made belief look expensive. Natalie closed her laptop and stood. She smoothed the navy blazer that wasn't hers and walked toward the room where the windows made the truth harder to ignore. By the time Natalie returned to the glass room, the morning haze over the city had cleared, leaving the skyline exposed in full, clinical daylight. Geneva was far away. So was every patient decision she'd ever made before today. The air here smelled faintly of lemon polish and ambition, the kind that lingers longer than reason. Margaret was already seated, a half-finished cup of coffee at her elbow and a thin stack of folders in front of her. She looked up the instant Natalie entered, reading the air the way a veteran nurse reads a pulse. You found the box. Natalie didn't bother asking how she knew. I did. And? It's worse than I expected, Natalie said quietly. They're not just cruel, they've institutionalized it. It's in the language, the way they joke, the way they document. Even the exit interviews read like apologies from the victims. Margaret nodded once. That's what I needed confirmed. HR's afraid to say it out loud. The culture rot started when the founder stepped back. Appearances replaced ethics. Appearances, Natalie repeated, tasting the word like a fault line. Exactly. They think civility is character. The door opened behind them. The CEO entered, jacket off, tie loosened, sleeves rolled to mid-forearm. He looked like someone who solved equations and politics with the same kind of exhaustion. You've seen it, he said to Natalie, not a question. I've seen enough. He dropped a tablet onto the table. The screen displayed a chart, anonymized complaints, color-coded, escalating from yellow to blood orange. We've been triaging PR, not fixing cause. The board wants results before the end of the quarter. Results, Natalie said, or silence? He gave her a wry look. Preferably both. For a few seconds, only the hum of the ventilation system filled the room. Margaret turned a page in her notes, the paper whispering. You're not here for a headline, the CEO said finally. You're here to tell me how bad it is and what it costs to fix it. I'm not a consultant, she said. I know, he replied. That's why I trust you. Her gaze flicked toward the city through the glass, so clean, so horizontal, like a stage pretending to be infinite. They laugh at people who serve them. That's not culture, it's contagion. Margaret spoke without looking up. There's a board dinner tonight. It's informal, but every executive director will be there. You should attend. Incognito? Natalie asked. As yourself, Margaret said. Not as the founder's wife, as the woman they humiliated. The CEO leaned forward. That's not a small risk. I don't do small risks, she said. He smiled faintly. You sound like him. I married him, she said. Fair, he allowed, pushing back from the table. Do what you need to do. Margaret, you handle the optics. He left with the kind of speed that implies trust more than dismissal. The door sighed shut behind him. Margaret studied Natalie for a long moment. They'll test you, she said. They won't know who you are yet, but they'll feel the imbalance. Don't correct them. Let them hang their own rope. I've seen enough rope, Natalie said. It's the knots I'm interested in. Margaret smiled, slow and dry. Good, let's tie a few. By 3 o'clock, the floor had settled into that post-lunch quiet where caffeine and pretense perform a duet. Natalie moved between cubicles like weather, unhurried, polite. People forgot she existed within minutes of greeting her, which suited her perfectly. At the coffee station, Vanessa held court, retelling a story about the Coke girl in the lobby. Each retelling made it funnier, more performative. The splash became theatrical, the reaction exaggerated, the victim dumber. Can you imagine? Vanessa said, stirring her oat latte. She just stood there. I'd have slapped him, or cried. Something. Not just stood there like a prop. Laughter bloomed around her. Even Jared chuckled, though it sounded strained now. He was learning the difference between apology and atonement, but not quickly enough. Natalie stood near the doorway, unseen for 3 full minutes. Then she stepped forward. Funny story, she said. The laughter snapped off mid-syllable. Vanessa's spoon clinked against porcelain. Oh, hey, we were just reliving your best moments? Natalie asked. Vanessa flushed. It's nothing personal. Office gossip, you know how it is. I do, Natalie said evenly. Gossip's how we tell each other who we really are. She didn't linger. She just smiled faintly and walked away, leaving behind silence thick enough to cut. Vanessa watched her go, the realization blooming like a bruise. She'd just lost control of the room. At 5:30, the day released its grip. The board dinner was scheduled for 7, held in the executive lounge on the top floor, a glass-walled aquarium overlooking the city lights. Natalie changed in her office, trading the modest consultant blazer for a tailored black dress that spoke softly but carried authority in its seams. She wore no jewelry except a thin silver ring and a wristwatch that had belonged to her husband. In the elevator, she pressed PH. The car rose in silence, floors blinking away like old mistakes. When the doors opened, laughter greeted her. Cultivated, brittle laughter. Crystal chimed against crystal. The city skyline sprawled in the background like an obedient audience. She stepped inside. The conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted, recalibrating around her presence. Vanessa was there, of course, glittering in sequins that overcompensated for something internal. Jared hovered near the drinks, eyes already shiny with too much self-reassurance. The CEO approached. Natalie, he said, voice pitched for discretion. Glad you came. So am I, she said. He gestured toward a group of board members. That's Evelyn Shaw, Finance, Mark Leeds, Operations, and Robert Vance, External Relations. They'll be curious. Curiosity's healthy, she said, moving toward them. Mark Leeds, tall, practiced grin, extended a hand. You must be the new consultant. Culture review, right? Brave soul, walking into this zoo. Every zoo's a reflection of its keeper, she said, shaking his hand. Robert laughed. I like her already. Evelyn tilted her head. We've heard about the incident. Unfortunate. But these things happen. You can't fix people's manners. No, Natalie agreed. But you can decide whose manners set the standard. Evelyn blinked, then smiled thinly. Touché. Dinner arrived, perfectly plated, perfectly meaningless. Conversations circled quarterly reports, expansion strategies, philanthropic optics. Natalie listened more than she spoke, filing every tone, every evasion. Midway through the meal, the CEO raised a glass. Before dessert, he said, a toast to perspective, and to those who remind us what it looks like when we lose it. His eyes found Natalie's for a beat longer than etiquette allowed. Glasses clinked. Wine moved like red silk. Vanessa excused herself mid-toast, retreating to the corridor with her phone clutched like an anchor. Natalie followed a minute later. She found Vanessa by the window pretending to text. Her reflection in the glass looked younger, almost innocent. You're good at pretending, Natalie said gently. Vanessa jumped. What? Oh, you scared me. I doubt it, Natalie said. You're not the scared type. Vanessa's defenses rose automatically. If this is about this morning, it's about a pattern, Natalie said. You lead with charm and finish with cruelty. You confuse superiority with security, and you're too smart for that. Vanessa stared, speechless for once. Do you know who I am? Natalie asked. You're consulting for HR? I'm the reason this company exists, Natalie said softly. My husband built it. I built him, and now I'm here to see who's tearing it down. The silence that followed had weight. Vanessa's breath hitched. Her phone slipped in her hand. I didn't know, she whispered. That's the problem, Natalie said. You never bothered to know the people you step on. She turned to leave. Vanessa's reflection stayed frozen in the glass, smaller somehow, like someone finally seeing herself without lighting. Back inside, dessert was being served. The CEO met Natalie's eyes across the room, an unspoken question there. She gave a small nod. It's begun. Margaret, from her seat near the window, caught the exchange and smiled faintly to herself. The board has no idea, she murmured to her wine. The city outside gleamed, 1,000 tiny lies twinkling at once. Inside the glass, Truth had finally found a seat at the table. The after-hours mixer called itself First Thursdays, as if the calendar had invented generosity. By 7, the atrium had changed from lobby to lounge. Edison bulbs dimmed to Instagram. Branded step-and-repeat backdrop erected against the wall. Craft beers in buckets that sweated like they'd done the work. A DJ with a playlist calibrated for plausible taste. Natalie arrived without fanfare. Black dress replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. The consultant badge clipped low, face open. The air smelled of citrus, ambition, and the faint electricity of people auditioning for each other. The room learned who had entered and decided she was nobody. Carter! Jared's voice cut through the chime of glass. He materialized from a cluster of interns and assistant project managers, like a spokesman for the unexamined. The red flush on his cheeks said he'd earned his confidence with beer rather than accomplishment. Vanessa hovered nearby, sequins quieter than last night, smile tighter. The DJ slipped into something nostalgically confident. Natalie arced past the bar to the water station, poured from a glass jug with floating lemon wheels, and took a sip. The evening's theme was printed on a chalkboard in deconstructed cursive: share, connect, celebrate. Someone had doodled a crown over share, and then perhaps wisely rubbed it out. Round 2, Jared announced to his circle, gesturing too widely with a tall plastic cup. You gonna tell me to apologize again? He grinned at Natalie like a boy daring a window to be a door. A few people clustered closer, drawn by the gravity of spectacle. This, the building reminded itself, was culture. She set her water down. You could try meaning it this time, Champ, she said, not unkindly. Oh, I mean it, he said. I mean, it wasn't that deep. You're fine. We're fine. He tapped the cup against the air to bless his thesis. Near the service entry, operations set up a slim camera on a tripod, one of the new engagement recorders marketing had requested for internal reels. The smiling, diverse, well-lit montage to prove belonging. The lens blinked red once, a little vein in the eye of the room. Margaret, arriving from a compliance debrief, noticed the blinking dot and the proximity of Jared's voice, and adjusted her course by 2 degrees. Vanessa cut in, voice pitched for camaraderie. Jared, don't, she said, which is different from don't you dare. She held her phone at half-mast, thumb hovering over record, the coward's prayer. Come on, Jared coaxed the universe. It's a party, test of reflexes. He lifted the cup, shoulders telegraphing mischief. Carter, truce? He tilted his head like a question mark with an ego. Natalie's face didn't change. Her gaze flicked once to the camera, then to the reflection of the room and the glass wall behind it. The watchers, the withholders, the employees who didn't want to be complicit and hadn't found their exits yet. Why don't you set the drink down, she said, and try saying something that improves the air? He laughed. That's not what drinks are for. Tonight, Vanessa said brightly to no one, is about celebrating wins. She flashed a grin at the operations cameraman. Right? Candid content. The cameraman, Ravi according to his badge, winced. He'd been told to capture joy, not evidence. But the lens is a simpler conscience than the people it serves. Jared pivoted, too proud to let the dare die. Seriously, we're good, he said. And with the same practiced flick as that first morning, he slung the Coke toward her. Higher this time, like a boy who had learned the arc of attention. It hit just below her collarbone. Cold exploded across warm skin. A hush followed like a loyal dog. Then a burst of laughter that died quicker than before, tangled in its own echo. Someone gasped, someone swore, someone clapped once and then swallowed the rest. Natalie didn't flinch. The Coke made a map down her blouse, tributaries heading for a coastline she refused to give up. She put 2 fingers on the table behind her to steady the furniture, not herself, and looked at Jared the way physicians look at scans before they speak. You had a second chance, she said. You spent it. For a beat, even the DJ miscounted. Jared, Vanessa hissed, eyes darting to the camera. What is wrong with you? Relax, he said, bluster turning brittle. We're sharing. It's brand. He laughed again. 10 on 10. Inside joke. It won't be inside for long, someone from legal muttered to someone from HR, already calculating angles, statements, exits. Ravi glanced at Margaret. Her face was a quiet verdict. He kept the camera on, framing the moment without zoom. No one would be able to call it a smear. It would be a mirror. From near the stairwell, Noah's voice arrived, not loud but sure. Hey, he said, stepping between laughter and its target. Don't touch her again. It sounded like the line someone rehearses alone and finally delivers in the right room. Heads turned, not toward Jared, but toward the small courage standing there in a navy sweater and conviction. Who are you? Jared scoffed, relief seeking a softer surface to dent. Someone who works here, Noah said, which means I have to live with the air you make. The sentence landed with a thud the room could measure. Jared's jaw worked, hunting for the previous reality where he was funny. It had closed. He glanced at Vanessa for a lifeline and found only her reflection, nauseated by its own angle. Across the room, Margaret took a single step forward, just enough to plant herself in the story. She did not intervene. She witnessed, professionally, like a skill. When Natalie's eyes lifted to meet hers, Margaret's expression said, I've got the copy. You choose the headline. An operations associate, a woman with a braid and a badge that granted her entry to places culture avoided, slipped Natalie a stack of polite napkins and a towel from somewhere that still honored cloth. Here, she murmured. No one deserves stickiness as a souvenir. Thank you, Natalie said, pressing the towel against cotton. She left the napkins on the table, unspent apologies. The circle loosened. People stepped back as if from a spill that might stain reputation. In the drift, Vanessa fumbled her phone, and in a panic disguised as indignation, hissed at Jared. Are you trying to get us all fired? Us? He snapped, the first time he'd heard plural in his own sentence. Ravi's camera swallowed the exchange without savor. Margaret's hand found her own phone, fingers moving with the discipline of someone who'd drafted statements in worse rooms. She typed 6 words and sent them to a board thread titled, Culture, Live. Carter's here. They don't know. On the mezzanine above, the CEO appeared at the railing, drawn by the pause in the music the way a captain feels a ship shift underfoot. He watched without leaning, On a bar table near the camera, his notebook lay open to an empty page titled Reckonings. "All right," HR's Rhea said, stepping in the way good managers step in, not to rescue, but to reassign gravity. "Fun fact, this evening is being recorded for internal training." She looked at Jared with the gentleness one uses on a dangerous animal. "You can leave now, or security can practice." He bristled, then withered a shade. "I didn't do anything." "You did a lot," Noah said. "Just not the work you were hired for." The DJ found the beat again and lifted the room a notch, as if music could sand away a stain. It didn't. Natalie set the towel aside and straightened, coke cooling into tack. She could have asked for an apology. She could have demanded a public one and gutted him with righteousness. Instead, she did something worse, something kinder. "Go home, Jared," she said. "Practice being a person." A laugh escaped someone, an involuntary release. It wasn't cruel. It was relief at a sentence that fit. Jared's eyes flashed the terror people feel when the mirror stops flattering. He tossed the empty cup toward the bin, missed, didn't pick it up, and left in a gust of cologne and denial. Vanessa stood her ground, but the ground had moved. She approached Natalie, voice low. "Look, this got out of hand. These mixers, people make mistakes." "Patterns," Natalie said. "People make patterns." Vanessa opened her mouth and closed it. The sequin dress caught light it couldn't convert to warmth. "I didn't throw anything," she said, which is not the same as "I didn't help." "No," Natalie agreed. "You just laughed." Behind them, phones buzzed in pockets. The clip, 40 seconds of cause, effect, and silence, had already begun its corridor migration via AirDrop, Slack, and the oldest network of all. Eyes. HR's incident bot pinged legal. Comms drafted a sentence with the word unacceptable and hoped it would age well. Margaret reached the camera. "Thank you," she said to Ravi. He nodded, relieved to be seen as properly afraid. She turned to the bar, collected 2 waters, and handed one to Natalie. The 2 women stood like bookends for a moment, holding up a story that had been collapsing under its own weight. "Tomorrow will demand theater," Margaret said quietly. "This will be the footage they give the actors." "Let them perform truth," Natalie said. "For once." Rhea approached, voice gentle and procedural. "Do you want to file a formal report?" "Yes," Natalie said, "but not the kind you're used to." Rhea's eyes warmed. "I'll hold the door." Noah hovered, uncertain whether proximity would be read as loyalty or impertinence. "Do you, need a ride or a shirt?" "I have a hoodie in my drawer that looks like it's never been cool, but it's clean." "Keep the hoodie," Natalie said, smiling for the first time that night in a way that reached her eyes. "But thank you." From the mezzanine, the CEO turned and disappeared into the inner hallway, dialing without looking. He spoke a sentence that began with names and ended with a meeting time no one would decline. Ravi powered the camera down. He didn't hit delete. He labeled the file in his head with something he'd want to believe later. Training, accountability mixer. The crowd thinned. People took their uneasy alliances to taxis and group chats. The sign on the chalkboard finished soaking up humidity until its chalk looked like regret. Vanessa collected her handbag and her composure. She approached Natalie once more, backbone stiff as a promise she didn't believe in. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'll tell HR I told him to stop." "For what it's worth," Natalie replied, "you can tell them you'll stop too." Vanessa's mouth tightened. "Stop what?" "Being very good at the wrong things," Natalie said, and turned toward the elevators. In the quiet that followed, Margaret's phone vibrated with a reply from the board thread. "Understood. 9 a.m. Full quorum." She looked at Natalie and raised one eyebrow. "Get some sleep," Margaret advised. "Morning brings microphones." "Good," Natalie said, stepping into the elevator as the doors sighed. "Let them catch up." The elevator descended slowly, the glass walls offering her back to the lobby like an honest reflection. At the security desk, the night guard glanced up with a sympathy he probably wasn't paid for and slid a box of tissues across the counter. She took one, not for her face, but to wipe a small brown dot from the edge of her badge. It came off clean. Outside, the city's neon performed sincerity against the dark. Inside, a file traveled to a server with a timestamp that would anchor future sentences to fact. Somewhere, a message pinged on a dozen very important phones, and on one that mattered more than all of them, a quiet thread labeled with her last name, opened by a man who had built something worth protecting. He typed only 3 words and hit send. "I'm coming in." Natalie stepped into the night air and closed her eyes. The coke would dry, the stain would not. She let the cool find her, and for the first time that week, she allowed a single tremor to run through her body and leave. Then she straightened. Morning would be heavy. She planned to make it honest. The office was quiet in that uneasy way companies get after a scandal. The hush that isn't peace, just calculation. By 9 a.m., every inbox at Murata Global had a new email from HR titled Statement Regarding Recent Incident at Staff Event. It was an elegant blur of corporate tone, regret without accountability, empathy without detail. Attached was a PDF with 3 bullet points about respect, community, and the importance of internal training. No one mentioned names, but everyone knew. Natalie arrived early, a deliberate move. The coke stain was gone from her clothes, but not from memory, hers or anyone else's. When she stepped off the elevator, conversations recalibrated mid-sentence. The hum of keyboards grew suddenly loud. She smiled at no one and everyone, setting her coffee down at her desk by the printer. Vanessa's chair was empty. Jared's too. HR had cordoned off their Slack access overnight, quietly converting them into lessons. Margaret appeared by her desk at precisely 9:05, holding 2 mugs of tea. "They've called a board session," she said. "Full quorum, 11 o'clock sharp. HR fallout?" "Wider," Margaret replied. "The founder's flying in." Natalie's heart shifted once in her chest. Not panic, just gravity. "He saw the video. He didn't need to. It reached the press." Margaret sighed. Anonymous leaked to the ledger. The headline is tasteful, for now. Corporate culture clash. Murata Global promises reform after incident. "And they think reform starts with statements," Natalie said. Margaret's eyes softened. "They don't know it starts with you." By 10, HR was running damage control like a triage unit. Posters about workplace integrity went up faster than printers could feed paper. Rhea moved through the aisles, clipboard in hand, assuring teams that the company takes these matters seriously. Vanessa arrived just after, looking ghostly in a beige trench coat and no makeup. She carried a box, her desk contents. People watched through the corners of their monitors. She didn't look at Natalie, just walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and disappeared. Noah stopped by a few minutes later. "They escorted Jared out 30 minutes ago," he whispered. "HR, security, everything." "Did he say anything?" "Something about lawyers," Noah said. "Something about being misunderstood." He hesitated. "He'll probably sell the story to whoever buys apologies." Natalie nodded. "He'll have an audience. People always do when they tell it backward." Noah lingered. "They're scared of you," he said finally. "They should be scared of themselves," she replied, closing her laptop. "I just noticed what was already there." At 11 sharp, the boardroom doors closed. It was the largest meeting since the merger. 12 directors, the CEO, 2 compliance officers, and Margaret taking notes. The founder, Michael Carter, sat at the far end of the table, looking both out of place and perfectly at home. His beard had more gray than the company remembered. His eyes hadn't softened with success. "Natalie," he said, voice quiet but deliberate. "Good to see you." "Likewise," she said, "though I wish it were under better circumstances." He nodded toward the CEO. "Start us off." The CEO stood, calm as a man hosting his own execution. "As you've seen," he began, "the video circulated externally early this morning. It shows a clear breach of conduct by one of our employees toward a consultant, who, unbeknownst to most of the company, was also Mrs. Carter." A murmur rolled through the room. The word "Mrs." hung like a bell tone. The CEO continued. "Our immediate actions included suspensions, mandatory retraining, and a full culture review. HR has drafted corrective measures. But this incident," he looked to Natalie, then to Michael, "raises deeper concerns about leadership tone, inclusivity, and our values in practice." Michael leaned back. "In other words, the company forgot who it was." No one contradicted him. Natalie clasped her hands on the table. What happened to me isn't new, she said. It's just visible. People here have been diminished quietly for years. The Coke? That was just the company introducing itself. Strong word, said Evelyn Shaw from Finance, the same director who dismissed her at dinner 2 nights earlier. But we've invested heavily in culture initiatives. Workshops, seminars, slogans, Natalie interrupted. You built messaging, not meaning. You teach empathy like it's a module. It doesn't last because no one in this building is rewarded for being kind. Margaret's pen scratched across paper, preserving every syllable. Robert Vance cleared his throat. Are we suggesting one man's stupidity indicts the entire company? Yeah, Michael said simply. If stupidity becomes entertainment, it's systemic. Silence followed. The CEO exhaled slowly. We need a new foundation. Real accountability. Not the kind that fits in a slide deck. Natalie met his gaze. Then stop protecting mediocrity. You have brilliant people suffocating under charmers and bullies. Promote the ones who listen. Margaret set down her pen. She's right. Culture isn't repaired with policy. It's replaced with example. Michael smiled faintly. Exactly what we built this company on 20 years ago. And somewhere we started hiring reflections instead of vision. Evelyn crossed her arms. And what's your solution then? Bring in an outsider to burn it all down? Natalie held her eyes. No. Stay inside and make it clean. The CEO turned to the founder. What would you propose? Michael considered for a moment. Natalie leads the internal audit. Effective immediately. She reports directly to me, not the board. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs, the sound of egos rearranging. Evelyn's smile cracked. Robert frowned. The CEO didn't blink. She's not just reviewing files, Michael continued. She's reviewing people. Every manager, every lead, every pattern of behavior that's tolerated cruelty in the name of competence. Natalie said nothing. She didn't need to. The authority in his words wasn't inherited. It was earned and shared. Any objections? Michael asked. Evelyn tried for composure. It's irregular. She's emotionally involved. Good, Munn, he said. It means she'll notice the details we don't. By afternoon, the building hummed with rumor again. Word of the meeting traveled fast, mutating as it moved. The consultant's taking over HR. The founder's wife is auditing the board. Someone from legal cried. At her desk, Natalie read through Margaret's summaries, pages of exit interviews, HR memos, and incident reports long buried under euphemisms. Every page was a mirror, and every reflection showed the same sin. Power mistaken for worth. A Slack message from the CEO popped up. CEO, the board's rattled. They'll resist quietly. Be ready. Natalie, I'm not here for their comfort. CEO, good, he's proud of you. She smiled faintly, unsure whether that made the task easier or heavier. At 5, Noah stopped by her desk. I saw the email about the audit. You're really doing it? Yes. Doesn't it feel weird, judging people you work with? It's not judgment, she said. It's clarity. He nodded. If you need help, collecting feedback, data, whatever. I might, she said. You're not afraid to tell the truth. Guess I learned from the best. As he walked away, she opened a new document and began typing the first report. Culture Audit, Preliminary Findings Observation. 1. Fear of embarrassment is stronger than desire for integrity. Observation 2. The kindest employees have the lowest salaries. Observation 3. Leadership confuses visibility with value. She paused, then added, Observation 4. The cure begins with discomfort. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. She hit save. Outside the window, rain began in clean, even lines, washing the glass without asking permission. For the first time in years, the building looked honest. The day began with a list. At 8:02 a.m., a company-wide calendar invite landed in every inbox, all hands, accountability, and path forward. 10 a.m., atrium, mandatory. Attached was a PDF titled Immediate Actions with 6 bullet points and very few adverbs. HR had never written so fast or so plainly. By 8:10, screenshots of a news segment were making the rounds. An anchor reading, Marada Global Promises Culture Reset After Internal Video Services, over the footage of a blurred cup arcing through air. The clip had been trimmed to 43 seconds. sound lifted, faces obscured just enough to pass legal muster without insulting eyesight. The internet called it the Coke video. The comments were exactly what comments always are: certain, performative, briefly loyal to whatever outrage pays better. At 8:30, security returned Jared's ID card in a small plastic bag to HR. It looked smaller without a lanyard. Vanessa arrived at 8:47, not in the trench coat this time, but in a simple sweater. She headed straight for HR with a posture that used to announce entrance and now asked permission. Ria met her at the doorway and closed it behind them. 2 minutes later, an email flew quietly to legal with the subject, separation, cooperative. At 9:00, Natalie's nameplate, consultant, was gone from the lip of her printer-side desk. In its place, N. Carter, culture audit, internal. The parentheses were Margaret's idea. It made the truth sound like a project, not a verdict. "Ready?" Margaret asked, appearing at the desk with 2 bottles of water and a stack of smaller lists. She wore navy again. She always did when the day would contain decisions. "Ready," Natalie said. "Good. I've queued speaking order and prepped the CEO. Founder will stand to the side. It will say more." She handed Natalie a single-page agenda. At the bottom, recognitions. "You actually put it in writing," Natalie said, surprised into a smile. "Reward is policy," Margaret replied. "Punishment is just maintenance." At 9:40, the atrium began filling with bodies. You can measure a company by how it stands before microphones. Arms crossed or hands open, eyes somewhere else or fixed. Laughter deployed only to deflect. People clustered with the people whose silence they trusted. The cameras from ops perched discreetly in their corners, little red dots ready to become governance. At 10:03, the CEO stepped onto the riser. No podium, just a mic and a long line of windows behind him, the city blurred into an honest gray. Michael Carter stood to his right, sleeves rolled, jaw set. He didn't take the mic. He didn't have to. "Morning," the CEO said. "Thank you for stopping the work to do the work." A low ripple of nerves. The atrium's acoustics forgave no one. "I'm not going to replay the incident. You've all seen enough of that. I'll say this plainly. What happened at First Thursdays is not an outlier. It is a symptom. We have the disease." A murmur, fear's cousin. "Effective immediately," he continued, "we're implementing 3 categories of action: accountability, repair, and recognition." He turned a page. Accountability. First, employment. 2 staff members are no longer with the company. Others will be placed on performance plans that measure behavior, not just output. If kindness feels like a demotion to you, the exits are marked and open. Somewhere at the back, someone exhaled like they'd been underwater too long. Second, leadership. Every manager will undergo 360 reviews conducted by the culture audit team. Promotions and bonuses will be tethered to those results. If you are brilliant and cruel, you are not eligible to manage anyone. Heads tilted. Hope's small, risky motion. Third, process. HR and legal will publish a simple, enforceable code of conduct with consequences you don't need a law degree to interpret. If you're confused about whether something's allowed, ask your conscience. If it's quiet, ask ours. He looked toward Natalie. Repair. Natalie Carter will lead the internal audit. She reports to the founder. She will walk the building. She will read what you wrote when you thought no one would. She will listen. A collective stiffening, and then slowly a loosening. Listening is a strange threat. It makes you want to confess. And finally, recognition, he said, allowing a small breath to find the mic. The necklace that found its way home. Chapter 1. The Struggle and the Celebration. Naomi, a kind-hearted but impoverished young woman, finally lands a job at a hotel after months of hardship. Her best friend Glory insists they celebrate at a club that night, a decision that changes Naomi's life forever. Chapter 2. A Night of Fate. At the club, Naomi feels dizzy and unknowingly wanders into a hotel room. Richard's room. Richard, drunk and heartbroken after a betrayal, mistakes Naomi's presence for something arranged. In confusion, they become intimate. Naomi awakens the next day, disoriented, with Richard gone and only a gold necklace left behind. Chapter 3. The Hidden Pregnancy. Weeks later, Naomi discovers she is pregnant. Overwhelmed with fear and shame, she confides in Glory but chooses to keep and raise the child. The necklace becomes her only clue to the mysterious father. Her life spirals downward when she loses her hotel job due to exhaustion from pregnancy. Chapter 4. The Necklace and the Child. 5 years pass. Naomi now works in a restaurant, raising her daughter Vera alone. Vera treasures the gold necklace as a symbol of the father she never knew. Meanwhile, Richard feels a strange emptiness in his wealthy life, unaware that his missing necklace and his child are both alive across town. Chapter 5. Lies and the Fake Pregnancy. Richard's girlfriend Tricia grows anxious and jealous, fearing Richard will never marry her. Her friend Cynthia advises her to fake a pregnancy to secure a proposal. The lie works temporarily as Richard begins planning a wedding, but fate intervenes when he crosses paths with a crying little girl on the street, wearing his lost necklace. Chapter 6. The Reunion and the Revelation. Richard helps the sick girl's mother, only to discover that Naomi is the woman from that forgotten night. The truth devastates and redeems them both. Richard embraces Vera as his daughter and brings Naomi and the child into his home, sparking Tricia's fury and cruelty. When Tricia injures Vera, Richard's protective instincts erupt, and he defends his newfound family. Chapter 7. The Truth, the Fall, and the Homecoming. Richard learns of Tricia's fake pregnancy, ends their relationship, and introduces Naomi and Vera to his father. The elder Hamilton welcomes them warmly. Tricia departs in silence, defeated by her own deception. Richard builds a new life with Naomi and Vera, founding a charity for single mothers. The story ends with Richard whispering, "You were wearing my necklace the day we met, but you brought me home." Naomi, a resilient, compassionate woman whose life of hardship turns into strength. Despite her poverty, she embodies grace and maternal devotion. Richard Hamilton, a wealthy but lonely businessman burdened by betrayal. His lost necklace becomes the key to rediscovering love and purpose. Vera, Naomi and Richard's daughter, innocent, pure, and unknowingly the bridge between two worlds, poverty and privilege. Glory, Naomi's loyal best friend, who provides emotional support and early guidance. Tricia, Richard's ambitious and manipulative girlfriend, whose deception and jealousy ultimately destroy her own happiness. Chief Hamilton, Richard's wise and moral father, who symbolizes forgiveness, tradition, and the strength of family values. Cynthia, Tricia's confidant, the voice of toxic advice and moral decay. The rise of hope. Naomi's new job signals hope, leading her unknowingly into destiny's trap. The night of confusion, a drug misunderstanding leads to the conception of Vera. Despair and determination. Naomi chooses motherhood despite losing everything. Parallel lives, Richard's success versus Naomi's survival, both haunted by emptiness. The necklace's return. A fateful street encounter connects father and daughter. Revelation and redemption. The truth heals wounds and reunites lost souls. Lies unravel. Tricia's manipulation collapses under truth's weight. Restoration and renewal. Love replaces loneliness. Integrity replaces illusion. Twist 1. The man Naomi met in confusion turns out to be the very millionaire whose necklace she kept for years. Twist 2. The child Vera unknowingly carries her father's identity around her neck. Twist 3. Tricia fakes a pregnancy, triggering her own downfall when the real child appears. Twist 4. Richard discovers not only that he has a daughter, but that his true happiness lies with the woman he once wronged. Twist 5. The moral inversion. The wealthy man learns love and integrity from the poor woman he once overlooked. By the time Naomi understood that the bed wasn't hers and the room didn't smell like her soap, the night had already sown a future she could never unpick. But that revelation belonged to a later hour. On this bright morning, the air was clean and ordinary, and hope lay neatly folded beside her best blouse. She had woken before the sun like a student cramming for life. The single room she shared with Glory was a collage of frugal miracles. Mended curtains, a chipped mirror, 2 toothbrushes in a mismatched cup. Naomi stood in front of the mirror and practiced her smile until it looked like something she might trust, then ironed the blouse so carefully you'd think the interviewers planned to examine the seams. "You'll glow without trying," Glory said, sleepy and sincere from the other mattress. "But if they ask about experience, tell them the truth. Then tell them what you can learn." "What if my voice shakes?" Naomi asked. "Let it," Glory replied, sitting up and reaching for her hand. "It means you care." They said a short prayer, the kind that sounded like a hand cupped over a candle in the wind. Then Naomi stepped into the morning. The hotel rose from the street like an idea of wealth, glassy, confident, and new. She smoothed her skirt and took a breath that felt too big for her chest. Inside, a receptionist directed her toward a set of conference chairs. 8 other applicants waited. Naomi counted their shoes to calm herself. When the hiring manager finally called her name, she stood so quickly her knee kissed the chair leg with a clack. The questions came soft at first. "Tell us about yourself. Why this hotel?" She spoke of reliability in early mornings and the respect she felt for rooms that welcomed strangers and made them feel like they belonged. She spoke of dignity in clean sheets. The manager's pen made slow, unreadable scribbles. Then the questions sharpened. "You've never worked in hospitality? How do we know you won't quit after a month?" Naomi swallowed, then allowed the truth to walk out of her mouth properly dressed. "Because I know the value of a door someone opens for you," she said, "and I've been waiting for this one." Later, in a corridor that smelled faintly of lemons and carpet glue, the manager shook her hand and said the words she had trained herself not to hope for. "Congratulations." The syllables landed like rain on concrete. Naomi blinked. I got it?" "You start Monday," he said, then added the schedule, the small print, the uniform sizes. She nodded at all the right places, but in her head, an orchestra was climbing from the pit. Outside, she walked, then ran. The city's heat tugged at her, but she barely felt it. When the door to their room cracked open and Glory's face appeared, Naomi's composure shattered exactly the way she hoped it would. "I got it," she sang, and the room swallowed the words and gave them back as laughter. Glory grabbed her, spun her, nearly knocked a pot off the single burner, and then they were both crying, the ridiculous, relieved kind of tears that leave salt at the corners of your lips. "Tonight we celebrate," Glory declared, eyes bright. "A little music, a little dancing. We'll borrow joy from tomorrow if we have to." Naomi shook her head on reflex. "No, I should rest. I start Monday." "Tonight," Glory insisted, half plea, half decree. "Your life just changed. Let it feel like it." Naomi's reluctance was less about clubs and more about the ghost of bad luck that had followed her for years. She'd learned to stand very still when good things happened, as if joy were a skittish animal. But Glory was persuasive in the way people are when they've watched you starve your dreams, and Naomi, gentle, stubborn Naomi, could be persuaded for one night. "All right," she said at last, and Glory whooped like a firecracker. The afternoon slid by in chores. Naomi wrote a list. Uniform needs, bus routes, what time to wake, what to pack in a small container for lunch. She mended a seam. She washed the good blouse again, though it was clean, because clean could always be cleaner. Glory braided her hair and freed 2 curls to soften her face. When Naomi dressed for the evening, she chose the simple black dress that fit the word enough like a glove. They arrived at the club as the city was beginning to forget itself. Neon leaped off the walls. The cues hummed. Security waved them in, and sound hit them like weather. Naomi's first sensation was a surprise. Not intimidation, but distance. The place felt like a dream she couldn't quite enter. Glory felt none of that. She tugged Naomi to the bar and ordered something sweet. Naomi took a slow sip and winced. "Too strong," she said, and they laughed because naivete can be a kind of elegance. They found a pocket of space near the dance floor and swayed where the bass could rearrange the bones in your chest. Glory's joy was kinetic. It pulled other people into its orbit. Strangers smiled. A woman in a glittering top told Naomi she had beautiful eyes. A song Naomi used to hear from a neighbor's window years ago, back when everything and nothing was possible, spun into the air, and for a moment, everything aligned. The old song, the new job, Glory's hand in hers, the sense that the invisible ledger of life had finally marked a small credit beside her name. Around then, a headache nudged behind her left temple. Not a scream, more a tap. She had taken a strong tablet earlier, a leftover from a week of stress when sleep had been stingy, and it had helped. But now the music braided itself with the drum in her skull, and the braid pulled tight. "You okay?" Glory asked, reading her face as if it were a lyric she knew by heart. "Just a headache," Naomi said. "I'll sit for a bit." Glory nodded, reluctant. "I'll get water." Naomi drifted toward the staircase at the edge of the dance floor, a little path marked by indifferent light. Upstairs, the noise softened into a muffled throb. The hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and perfume. On the left, a door stood ajar, spilling a slice of darkness into the corridor. The sign above it advertised a hotel. She paused. "This is silly," she told herself. "Just find a chair." But the headache pushed again, a soft insistence. She looked back toward the stairs. Glory had vanished into the crowd, a sequin among 1,000. "I'll be 5 minutes," Naomi promised no one, and stepped into the dark. The room was cool in the way air feels after it crosses a polished floor. A bed spread itself across the center like a quiet ocean. She told herself she would not lie down, just sit at the edge, cool her temples, wait for the medicine to finish whatever work it still owed her. But when she sat, the mattress had the tenderness of clouds, and when she leaned back, her bones sent up a little hymn of relief. She set a silent timer in her mind, 2 minutes, and closed her eyes to stop the room from swaying. Downstairs, the song changed. Upstairs, the world loosened its grip. In another part of the city, a man in a car stared straight ahead and tried to remember how to breathe like a person who trusted people. Betrayal felt metallic in his mouth. The idea of walking into a room where music pretended the world was simple appealed to him in a feral way. He told the driver to head toward the lights. Naomi dreamed a thin dream in which she was late for a bus that never arrived and then, absurdly, arrived everywhere at once. When she jolted awake, she didn't know whether a minute or an hour had passed. The headache had migrated into a cottony fog that made decisions float just beyond reach. She sat up, blinked, and realized the door had moved. It was open wider now, as if a different breath in the room had asked it to. Footsteps paused at the threshold. In the darkness, a figure filled the doorway. Broad-shouldered, steady in the way expensive things are steady, and yet fragile in posture, like someone who had been walking through fire politely. The scent that followed him was unfamiliar and clean. Naomi's first instinct was to stand and explain what exactly she didn't know. She tried to rise, but the fog pressed her back gently, like a nurse. She thought to speak. The sentence scattered. She could only manage a soft, "I'm sorry." The figure hesitated, as if listening to a voice she could not hear. He stepped inside and the door closed with the hush of money. All of this would matter more than the two of them yet understood. But rewind an hour, rewind to the corridor and the staircase, and Glory's hand in hers. Rewind to the smile she had practiced in the mirror and the handshake in the lemon-scented hallway. Rewind to the word congratulations. Tonight was supposed to be a small celebration to honor a small victory. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to end with the two of them laughing on their mattresses, trading what-ifs and maybes until sleep took pity. Instead, the night had found her and wrapped itself around the fragile hinge of her life and turned. Downstairs, Glory finally emerged from the crowd with 2 bottles of water and no Naomi. She craned her neck, scanned the dance floor, then the bar, then the line for the restroom. Her smile thinned. She pulled out her phone. No signal. She looked at the staircase and narrowed her eyes. 2 minutes, she murmured, a promise to the air, and started up. On the landing, a security light shivered. Somewhere, a glass broke. Somewhere else, someone laughed so hard it sounded like crying. The city outside flung lights against the sky like coins into a fountain, asking for wishes it couldn't keep. And in the quiet room above the noise, a door settled into its frame with a soft click, as if the night had just agreed to keep a secret.